A poor student married a wealthy 70-year-old woman. However, after only 7 days, he was shocked when she made a surprising request. Dmitry Ivanov was only 23 years old, but he felt like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. A diligent law student, he believed that only hard work and perseverance could help him build a better future. However, reality constantly tested him. 2 years ago, the sudden death of his father from a rapid heart attack shattered everything. The man who had been the family's rock was gone, leaving Dmitry not only with grief but also with a mountain of obligations. Long-standing debts that no one had suspected began to surface in the form of endless bills and threatening letters. Dmitry became the head of the family, but he didn't have the resources to support his sick mother and younger sister. In particular, his mother's treatment was a critical issue, with the cost of medications, tests, and chemotherapy being prohibitively expensive. Meanwhile, his 14-year-old sister, Clara, tried to smile and continued to dream of becoming a veterinarian, despite the difficulties. Dmitry hid the full extent of their dire situation from her, trying to shield her from the worst. Each envelope was a reminder that he was losing the battle. He worked tirelessly at a small law firm, but his salary barely covered the bare necessities. Sometimes he wondered if he was doing everything he could. How could he save his mother, give his sister a future, and continue his studies? One day, one of the lawyers pulled him aside and suggested he attend a social event, thinking that he could use a bit of a distraction. Dmitry considered the invitation to be absurd, as he had neither the time nor the appropriate attire for such gatherings. However, giving in to the lawyer's persistence, he agreed, hoping to make valuable contacts, which he had often heard were key to success in the profession. In the evening, Dmitry found himself in a completely different world. The grand mansion where the event was held sparkled with chandeliers, classical music played in the background, and the guests were dressed impeccably. Dmitry felt out of place but tried to blend in, attempting not to attract attention. Soon, he was approached by a woman unlike anyone he had ever met. At 70 years old, she radiated confidence, as if the whole world was at her feet. Her gaze was discerning but without arrogance. She noticed that he was not from around there, and Dmitry honestly admitted that he was there by chance. The conversation that began was longer than he expected. Elena was genuinely interested in his life, his family, and his dreams. Dmitry, not knowing why, told her more than he had ever told strangers. At the end of the evening, they said goodbye, and Dmitry didn't suspect that this meeting would forever change his life. In the following days, he tried to return to his usual routine, but thoughts of Elena Mikhailovna lingered. Her confidence, attention, and ability to see something more in him than just a poor student left a lasting impression. Meanwhile, the situation at home was worsening, his mother's condition was deteriorating, and even Clara, trying to stay strong, began to show signs of distress. Dmitry did everything he could to comfort his sister, but he knew he was on the brink. Debts were piling up, and a sense of helplessness overwhelmed him. One ordinary day, something unexpected happened. Elena Mikhailovna called Dmitry and invited him to her home on an important matter. This call baffled him. What could Elena want? Why was such an influential and distant woman showing interest in him, a simple student struggling to survive? Dmitry considered declining the invitation, but remembering his mother and sister, he decided he had nothing to lose. The next day, he went to Elena's mansion, which looked even more impressive in the daylight. The butler led him to the living room, where Elena was waiting in a comfortable chair. She thanked him for coming and proposed discussing something important. Dmitry complied, feeling the tension rising inside. Elena got straight to the point, stating that she saw qualities in him that were rare and wanted to make him an offer. Dmitry listened intently, but nothing could have prepared him for what she said next. She proposed that he marry her. These words were like a thunderclap. Dmitry asked if he had heard her correctly. Elena explained that it wasn't about love or romance, but about a mutually beneficial agreement. He needed help, and she had her reasons. Dmitry didn't know how to react to such a proposal. Marriage to a woman he barely knew. But thinking about his family and the burden he carried, he began to see a strange logic in her words. Elena suggested he think it over and come back with a decision the next day, adding that sometimes the most unexpected opportunities change our lives forever. Her words haunted him all night. How could his life have come to this? Her offer promised him a chance to save his family, and he couldn't ignore it. Agreeing meant giving up a normal life, facing judgment from others, and accepting a role he didn't fully understand. But the image of his sick mother and his sister with her dreams guided him. Dmitry couldn't afford to hesitate. The next morning, he returned to the mansion with a heavy heart but firm resolve. Elena greeted him in the living room, as calm as before. She asked if he had considered her offer, and Dmitry answered affirmatively, adding that he needed to understand what she expected from him. Elena smiled slightly, as if anticipating his question, and explained that she expected only mutual understanding, trust, and fulfilling his role. Dmitry felt a chill run down his spine. This woman with the piercing gaze was clearly hiding more than she revealed. The wedding took place quickly, without pomp and romance, only the necessary formalities and an atmosphere of awkwardness. Dmitry understood that it was an unusual marriage, more like a carefully crafted agreement. After the wedding, his life changed drastically. For the first time in years, he didn't have to worry about money. Debts were paid off, his mother received the necessary treatment, and Clara was enrolled in a private school. Dmitry could breathe a sigh of relief, but something inside him still felt uneasy. Elena, on the other hand, remained enigmatic. She spent hours working in her office, writing letters and reviewing documents that Dmitry wasn't allowed to see. When they spent time together, she was polite but kept her distance, as if avoiding any personal attachments. One day, walking down the hallway, Dmitry noticed the office door slightly ajar. Looking inside, he saw Elena sitting at her desk with trembling hands, holding a sheet of paper. Dmitry quietly stepped back, trying not to give himself away, but the image was etched in his memory. That same evening, Elena called him for a conversation. She sat in the living room, and a sealed envelope lay on the table in front of her. She explained that it was time to learn the truth about her proposal and asked him to read the contents of the envelope. However, before he could do so, she added that what was written there was just the beginning. Dmitri, confused, asked, "The beginning of what?" Elena simply looked at him with a look that combined determination and sadness. Dmitri, holding the envelope, hesitated, but decided to open it. Why couldn't she just explain everything herself? She replied that some things are better learned gradually. Dmitri retired to his room where he finally opened the envelope. Inside were a handwritten letter and a document. Elena's clear handwriting filled the page with words that echoed in his mind. Elena wrote that if he was reading this, it meant he had accepted not only her proposal but also the responsibility that came with it. She confessed that she had a terminal illness, which had completely changed her outlook on life. She had no family, no heirs, no close people she could trust. The decision to marry Dmitri was a deliberate choice. She chose him because she saw in him the honesty she couldn't find in others. She believed that he was the person she wanted to pass her legacy on to. Dmitri felt the weight of these words. He didn't know if he was ready for such responsibility, but he understood that Elena was right in her assessment. He had always fought. Even when the whole world was against him. The document attached to the letter was a power of attorney transferring control of a vast fortune and management of the charitable foundation Elena had been building throughout her life to Dmitri. When Dmitri returned to the living room, Elena was calmly waiting for him. She asked if he had read the letter, and Dmitri replied affirmatively, but confessed that he didn't understand why she trusted him with something like that. Elena sighed and, looking out the window, explained that she saw in him what she hadn't noticed in the people closest to her: honesty and compassion. She had been surrounded all her life by those who only thought of their own gain. She emphasized that he had asked for nothing but was willing to sacrifice everything for his family. Dmitri asked what she wanted him to do now. Elena replied that she wanted him to use her fortune for good, to trust himself and who he was. Only 7 days had passed since the wedding, and they had flown by like a whirlwind. Now he stood before a future he couldn't even imagine. Elena gave him not only wealth but also a purpose. But Dmitri was still unsure whether he was ready to accept her legacy. It seemed like he was living in a parallel reality, and everything he had known before had been turned upside down. From now on, he was responsible for a legacy he was just beginning to understand. As Dmitri tried to figure out what had happened, Elena remained surprisingly calm, continuing to go about her business as if preparing for the inevitable. Dmitri felt the weight of responsibility growing. One evening, while in the library with her, he asked why she had chosen him. She could have trusted anyone: experts, advisors. Elena replied that most people only cared about themselves, and she didn't want her legacy to end up in the hands of those seeking only power and wealth. She needed someone capable of doing more, and Dmitri had a heart that believed in good and evil. Dmitri was silent, trying to grasp her words. He didn't know if he would live up to her trust, but he knew he couldn't let her down. Spending more time with Elena, he learned about her charitable foundation. Elena had devoted years to helping the poor, funding educational projects, and supporting young people in difficult circumstances. She did it with passion but was disillusioned by people who sought only gain. That's why she stopped trusting people until she met Dmitri. Gradually, he began to participate in the work of the foundation, meeting those whose lives had been changed by Elena. He met young people who had received scholarships, families who had gotten back on their feet, and entire communities that had been transformed thanks to her efforts. For the first time, he realized the scale of what Elena had created. But despite the gratitude, he continued to doubt whether he could bear this legacy and live up to Elena's trust. In the last week of her life, Dmitri spent more and more time with her. Their conversations became more personal and deeper. Elena talked about her youth, her achievements, and her regrets, about the choices she had made and not made. She said that money hadn't brought her the joy she had imagined, and that the only thing that mattered was the mark you leave on the lives of others. On her last day, saying goodbye, she said, "Don't be afraid, you have everything you need." A few hours later, she passed away peacefully. The mansion felt different without Elena. The silence that symbolized her calm nature had become empty and heavy. Dmitri wandered the corridors, trying to grasp the loss of the woman who had changed his life in such a short time. Despite everything she had left him, he felt lost. The responsibility seemed too great for a man who had barely made ends meet a few weeks ago. Sitting in his new living room, Dmitri looked through the documents Elena had prepared for him. Among the papers, he found another letter. Elena wrote that if he was reading this, then the road was now his. She didn't expect perfection from him, but only hoped that he would do his best with what she had left him. She asked him to use her fortune to give hope to those who, like him, felt the weight of the world on their shoulders, and not to be afraid of mistakes, because mistakes are also experience. Her words remained his mentor. But he still doubted that he had the right to take on such responsibility. In the following days, Dmitri focused on the foundation's activities. He visited projects Elena had started and met people whose lives had been changed by her. A young woman told Dmitri that she was able to graduate from medical school thanks to the foundation, which believed in her when no one else did. These meetings stirred Dmitri. He began to understand the true meaning of Elena's legacy, not in money, but in what it could do for others. Meanwhile, his mother was recovering, and Clara was dreaming of enrolling in veterinary school. Dmitri felt immense relief seeing his family thrive, but he knew his journey wasn't over. One evening, sitting in his office, he made a decision and called the foundation's directors to gather everyone for a meeting. The next day, he presented his vision for the organization's future, helping those in difficult situations and creating new opportunities for those in need, just as Elena had once helped him. At the end of the meeting, Dmitri felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. He realized that Elena had left him not just a legacy but a new reason to live. Now he was building something that was changing people's lives. Under Dimitri's leadership, the fund expanded, investing in education, medicine, and support programs for talented youth. Dimitri felt that his life was no longer limited to the struggle for survival. Each day was a new battle and a new victory. But despite the progress, he often wondered if he was living up to Elena's trust. One of the important events was a ceremony organized by one of the fund's first scholarship recipients, a doctor who had completed his education thanks to Elena. He said that the fund had saved not only his career but also the life of his mother, who needed urgent treatment. These words were a reminder to Dimitri that Elena's legacy lived on in every person saved. This speech touched all those present, and Dimitri realized that he carried not only responsibility but also a real impact. The fund's activities thrived, and Dimitri began to spend more time with his family. His mother had fully recovered, and Clara was shining in school and making plans to enter university. Sister admitted that he had fulfilled all their dreams. Elena gave him a chance, but the strength had always been in them. Despite his achievements, Dimitri never forgot Elena. He dedicated a memorial room in the fund's building, where he placed her photographs, letters, and excerpts from speeches to preserve her legacy and inspire others. One winter day, Dimitri was invited to the opening of a school financed by the fund. He remembered Elena, and the words addressed to her in his thoughts echoed in his heart. When the event ended, Dimitri lingered on the stage to look at the fund banners with Elena's name, holding back a smile and remembering the woman who had changed his life. Returning home, he saw Marina and Clara waiting for him in the living room. This simple scene was filled with deep meaning. His mother was healthy, his sister full of energy and dreams. Everything he so wanted to protect remained intact. The conversation was interrupted by the rain outside the window. Dimitri watched the drops and thought of Elena. He went to Elena's memorial room, where one of her last letters lay, and again read the lines that inspired him. It's not about how much time you have, but about what you do with it. The mark you leave defines who you are. Trust yourself. Dimitri's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and confidence that he was doing everything right. Leaving the room, he met fund fellows, and one of them thanked him for changing his life. Dimitri replied that it was thanks to Elena. Dimitri continued his journey, ready to change the world. He knew this path would never end, because what Elena had given him was more than just a legacy, it was a fire, changing lives forever. He inhaled deeply and with confident steps went on, ready to change the world.